Doesn't seem. Ooh. Okay. Did you do that? Yeah. Oh, okay. I think I have powers. No, I just need my glasses again. Okay, so let's see. That's be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So we're going to start with the fifth one. And just to give you a sense of this, on the Chinese side, maybe just do those first two lines and then we'll just go right into the English. So it's Pu Wang Shi Fang Ju Guo Du Guang Shuo Miao Fa Xing Yi Li. And then we'll just go right into the English. Anyone who goes to all lands, everywhere in the 10 directions, broadly speaking, the wonderful Dharma, to cause its meaning and benefits to flourish, who dwells in the limits of reality without being moved or shaken, is a person whose merit and virtue equals a Buddha. And then, and that's the second one. The one prior to that, anyone in the 10 directions who seeks the Dharma with unchanging zeal and cultivates merit and virtue to the fullest extent can completely eliminate or go beyond the two marks of existence and non-existence. Such a person is one who truly sees the Buddha. I'm sorry I got those out of order. My fault. If you look at your text too, last week we finished up on this idea, and then Jin Chuan talked about it as well, the idea of Chan Samadhi, deeply enters Chan Samadhi, contemplates the Dharma nature. I wanted to just maybe transition from that tonight a little bit. There's three aspects, they call the three aspects of study and practice within Buddhism, sometimes called the three non-outflow learning or studies, and it consists of precept, samadhi, and wisdom. Shila, samadhi, prajna. That's just, and it's common and unites all traditions. This is really basic bedrock. To get the wisdom of liberated knowing and seeing and awakening requires a stabilizing and equanimity of mind, and that in turn depends on moral clarity and moral centering and ethical balance. So that's the ethical balance. Shila, samadhi is the equanimity, and then the corresponding insight that arrives almost effortlessly when those two are in place. So samadhi often though gets translated as trance or absorption. Yeah, I know you find it, but that's been a standard rendering of it as sort of a kind of withdrawn state of mind that is oblivious to one's surroundings. I will argue tonight, not just from this text, but other texts, but this text in particular doesn't go along that line. It's more a balanced, centered, unmoved awareness. It's not a trance or withdrawal from reality, but actually a clear and unfazed, impartial beholding of things as they really are. Sometimes it's called concentration, proper concentration and reception. The concentration doesn't mean a sort of, like my dog up in Maine sees a hole in the ground and somehow gets the idea that there's a mouse or a snake or something in there, and then I wrongly say enters samadhi, but what it does is just fixates on that hole and just stares at it unwaveringly. So that is not the concentration that's talking about here. It's the concentration talking about here is an alert attention to everything within and without, at the same time not being caught up in it, not rejecting it and not being caught up in it, impartially observing the rise and fall and the movement of the things around you. And then the reception is the openness to seeing things as they are versus projection. So most of what we do, at least according to this text, is that we project our ideas, our fears, our values, our emotions, our wants, our desires, our fantasies, whatever. We project those out onto the existing substrata of reality and then see it through those lenses. We actually construct what we experience. We're not experiencing it raw, we're experiencing it through all of these filters of consciousness and whatnot. So samadhi then is not using those projective filters anymore. It's dropping those down. Read Master Wa's commentary here, it's very interesting. If you don't have any patience or pliancy, and that's from this previous passage, when you cultivate the way, then you won't be able to, quote, enter deeply into Chan Samadhi. To enter deeply into Chan Samadhi means that you obtain genuine concentration and reception. Those are the two I was referring to. And then he says, well, what is shallow Chan Samadhi versus deep? Shallow means that in the beginning of your Zen or Chan Samadhi, you aren't solid. So you eventually make a few steps forward, then you retreat. You don't hold a constancy to it. It's a toggle switch kind of state. Sometimes you experience what you have a moment of clarity. You're in a meditation session or you meditate at home, and there's a sort of proper awareness, alertness, and concentration. But then you get up and move and you encounter something and it's like, where did it go? It just vanishes. You subdued the anger, or you just subdued the craving of something, and you see it, and it's almost like the flame is quiet. And then the mind moves, getting up, or not even getting up. It can happen before you get up, and the whole thing flutters again. So he says that eventually then you retreat. But when you deeply enter Chan Samadhi, you're in Samadhi at all times. And this is where I want to go with this. It's not talking about a meditation practice. And it's not even talking about entering a state of meditation absorption. And then, when you hit the bell at the end, then you come out, you move around. That's called a kind of samadhi, but the great samadhi that's being talked about here, the dasanme, means, and this is what he's talking about here, you're in samadhi at all times, walking, standing, sitting, and lying down. Now, lying down could just mean resting, but it also means, at a deeper level, even in your state of dreams at night, that you have a centered awareness, a mindfulness. You can actually see that you're dreaming. And then when you're awake and moving around, you can see that you're dreaming too. It's both just different dreams. One is the waking dream, one's a sleeping dream, but they're both, okay. I don't want to go too far in that, but that's what it is. And in these four great deportments, it's called walking, standing, sitting, and lying down. You're at all times within that proper balanced awareness. And you're able to contemplate the nature of Dharma, the nature of things. The Buddha constantly contemplates the real mark of Dharmas. If you can understand the Dharma nature, then you can keep from retreating. Why is it that you retreat? It's because you don't understand things as they really are. So you misperceive things as they are, get spooked, get moved, and then that samadhi-centered awareness starts to falter. So that was just a little more on that theme of samadhi, because I wanted to go into that. It's very interesting when Buddhism was first coming to the attention of Westerners, Anglo-American Westerners, in the middle 19th century, seriously starting to look at it. They weren't very much attracted to samadhi and to meditation. This seemed to them, first of all, a waste of time. They were very productive people. And so to sit quietly, doing nothing, seemed to be an immense waste of energy. We could actually be building things, making things. I think of Dr. Seuss and the Lorax. If any of them know the Lorax? It's a must-read. It was banned for one time, along with Huckleberry Finn and other things. Never mind. So the Lorax is a kind of tale of frantic construction, building of things that everybody needs. And if they don't need them, you advertise to convince them they need things they don't really need. And so this kind of idea to the early Westerners who were attracted to Buddhism, they were interested in the philosophical part of it. They were interested in what seemed to be the scientific parallels that it had with, at that time, thoughts of evolution and so forth, and the beginning of physics. But the meditation was not interesting to them all. And they felt it was sort of like a drugged out trance, sitting spaced out under a lotus tree, caught up in internal reveries that were unreal. Only really in the beginning, let's say, in the 1950s really, does the culture here start to become interested in serious meditation practice. And that's when you see the introduction of Zen through people like D.T. Suzuki coming to the West and getting a very popular reception. So our culture shifted from a complete obsession with the external world and avoidance of the internal to the other way around. And it's still with us. So still the large attraction for people coming to Buddhism first off is the meditation practice. But I wanted to explain the samadhi thing tonight because sometimes they come seeking this altered state of consciousness of withdrawal from reality as the goal, and then get disappointed if they don't get it, or worse, if they do get a kind of state like that, get attached to it and really get lost. So anyhow. The other thing is a very interesting line, and I'm trying to carry over from is universally encourages living beings to bring forth the mind of the way. That can be done only really if you have a mind for the way. It's like if you yourself don't have a mind, a heart for doing this, it's almost impossible to excite anybody else about it. And often, if you have it, you don't even have to say anything. People pick up on something that's happening with you that's really interesting, and they might ask, what are you doing? Now, you don't want to give the Chan answer at that point and say, nothing. No. Which sounds very profound, but it's misleading to somebody. So, but I want to point out that this can be extolling, it can be active, it can be praising, it can be lifting up, encouraging someone when they begin to practice. Yeah, go ahead, take the precepts. That's really a good thing to do. It's made a difference for me and so on and so forth. But it can also be passive in the sense that encouraging is that you're pulling back on your jealousy and competitiveness with other people. So it says you encourage people, but encouraging can be that active, but it can also be a passive in the sense of what you're not doing. Encouragement comes from not trying to beat somebody else out or look better or speak better or cultivate harder and so on and so forth, or become jealous and obstructive when people are doing their own practices. So it's very tricky. You can say, well, I extol people all the time, but at the same time I'm competing with them. You can be competing with translation. You can competing with how long you can sit. You can compete to how many retreats you've gone on. Keeping notches, how many times you recite, and so forth. But that is a kind of obstructiveness, and that's a kind of discouragement to somebody. So you can do both. Master Hua's, and the reason I thought about that was, again, Master Hua's commentary says, here's how one should think. I'm doing well, and I want others to do well too. I obtain advantages, and I want others to obtain those advantages too. This is how you should, quote, universally encourage living beings to bring forth the mind for the way. I do this because living beings are the same as myself. I'm quoting his commentary. They are one with me, and I am one with them. And so, if there is even one living being who hasn't resolved the heart intent on awakening and liberation, then it's the same as if I hadn't resolved my own mind that way. So this is the called the single substance, Tumti Dabe, single substance, great compassion. It isn't, and I keep trying to stress this isn't something that is a cultivated piety. Like, I really need to think of being one with you. It's really difficult, I must say. If you were a different, better person and you were nicer to me, I could be one with you, but you aren't, and so I really have to work on this. I have to suck up all your shortcomings and, and so on and so forth, and then I can kind of be one with you. That's not what's going on here, okay? This is a very natural opening of the heart that is almost uncontrollable to actually see the sameness. Not only the sameness in substance, earth, air, fire, and water of all living things, including the earth, but it's also a sort of seeing the sameness of a heart and mind and potential and limitations. And there's an acceptance of that across all these domains. Obviously, this doesn't allow for racism and ethnocentric, denial and clannish only clinging and so on and so forth. This has no country and doesn't even have a family per se or a clan. It has a kind of universal connectivity and identity with all living things. And it's, again, coming out of this direct insight of wisdom that is not sought after. It just happens spontaneously with the attainment of this kind of insight. So this is really important to understand. Otherwise, you start to burn out trying to do this. And you can't do it. I get compassion fatigue. Well, the fatigue, you don't get, towards yourself, I'm never weary. I'm always there for me. I know what. Any hour of the night, I'm there for me. It's others I get tired of. That's not the compassion that's being talked about here, okay? There's still a duality there. Okay, so here's a passage I like again. This one comes from the Tao Te Ching. This was when I first started practicing, way back, when was this? This was like in the 60s, 1960s. I know, if I get into anything past the 60s, it's ancient history. There's some people here who weren't even an idea in the 60s. In any event, this was one of the first texts I was drawn to, was the Tao Te Ching. And I used to go on kind of wilderness solo backpacking into the mountains, the Rockies or the Sierras, and I would take a copy of the Tao Te Ching with me. English, I didn't have any Chinese, and just read it. And so I had this long-standing resonance with it. But also, my teacher used all these classics to teach us. He didn't simply use Buddhist texts. We had Buddhist, Confucian, Taoist, and Western. So here's a passage I think that kind of hits on this idea of encouraging others and that great compassion. This is the passage. The sage has no heart of his own. He uses the heart of the people as his heart. Of the good person I approve, and of the bad person I also accept. And thus he gets goodness in return. The truthful person I believe, but the liar I also believe in. And thus I get truthfulness. There's another line here also that says, it's by not believing in people that you turn them into liars. I really like that, especially with working with children. This is really a useful thought. And then the passage closes. The sage, in the dealings with the world, seems like one dazed with fright, and for the world's sake, dulls his wits. Really a beautiful passage. In other words, what I was saying before, it's not to outshine and outcompete with others. Dulls the wits is to have a kind of closeness where there's mutually support going on all the time, but you're not trying to excel and be above, because then that discourages others. And it brings out the kind of wrong attitude. So, and then the last closing line is, the 100 families all the time strain their eyes and ears, but the sage at all times sees and hears no more than an infant sees and hears. So, okay. These passages, I started in the 60s, and still to this day when I read them, I keep getting more and more out of them. And if you know Chinese and can look at the Chinese and the translation, this is probably one of the most translated Chinese classics, I think, ever, is the Tao Te Ching. There's probably literally hundreds of translations out there now. But it's a good companion. It's a good thing to hang on to. Instead of your phone at your bedside at night, you could put the Tao Te Ching, and read a passage or two. So, no, I'm going to download it online. You read it in print. Anyway. Okay, next line. Anyone in the 10 directions who seeks Dharma with unchanging zeal and cultivates merit and virtue to the fullest extent can completely eliminate the 2 marks of existence. Such a person is one who truly sees the Buddha. Not to dwell on this too much, but what I want to stress here is the first word, the anyone. We have gone from a description of the Buddha and Buddhas and even bodhisattvas to now anyone. And so what the text is coming back to is the universal potential for full awakening that everyone and anyone possesses. So that's why it says anyone. It doesn't mean only special beings can do this. Anyone. And anyone who what? And this is where the Avatamsaka and these texts become a map, a guideline. Anyone who does this. So it's actually pointing out how we get from where we are to that, rather than just making us feel it's some exalted state out there and it's not possible. It actually, if you read it sort of hermeneutically, it is actually listing the qualities and the criteria for attaining full awakening, even though it's presented maybe as praise sometimes. So it says anyone in the 10 directions, meaning anywhere, any land, any country, any time, who truly seeks the Dharma, seeks the truth, with unchanging zeal. And unchanging means like unflagging. It's sustained, energetic enthusiasm. You've got to keep the fire going for this. If you're one day hot, 2 day cold, it never sparks. It can be very frustrating. This doesn't mean you have to burn rubber. It doesn't mean you have to sort of burn out. I got to get the way. You just have to be steady and constant. It's like a stream going over rocks and whatnot. It's just going and going and going and gradually smooths things out. My teacher was a really good example of a kind of steady, persistent vigor. Didn't go up, didn't go down, but every day it was just there, up early, doing what had to be done, making little Buddha statues, a couple each day until there were 10,000. That approach was what I would call the unchanging zeal. So unchanging is more important than really intense and then falling off, which is easy to do. You're weekend warriors, and then during the week you just couch potatoes. So this is kind of, you want to keep a balance of doing this. That means you set up routines. And believe me, I'm one who was, for a long time in my life, resistant to routine. But I've learned over the years that a good routine, held to regularly, is the thing that cuts, it penetrates. Everybody I know who's excellent, whether they're art or music or athletics or whatnot, has learned this lesson. The constant, just steady, enthusiastic, even when you don't feel like it. My Tai Chi teacher would say, someday you want to do 3 hours Tai Chi, do 1 hour. Someday you feel, I don't want to do anything, do 1 hour. And he said, in that way you will make progress. But if you just do what you feel, you just keep going up and down, a merry-go-round. Okay, and it cultivates merit and virtue to the fullest. One way to cultivate merit and virtue to the fullest is in the previous passage with the Chan Samadhi sustained with the precepts and then benefiting others. Because the merit and virtue comes from, ironically, not what you accumulate for yourself, but you extend to and share with others. So this is why in this particular Dharma, the actual giving, the paramita of giving Dharma, giving fearlessness, giving kind words, all of this is the building up of the merit and virtue. The 2 marks of existence, this is very interesting. Anybody know what that is? Just reference off people that have been through our BA or MA course who might remember 2 marks of existence. Don't look it up. Anybody who hasn't? What are they? Oh, I know. Anita and Anatta? There are three marks that are talked about, or three signs, seals often they're called. Anita, which is what? Anita, anicca, huh? Impermanence. And anatta, non-self, and then dukkha, our favorite, unsatisfactoriness. But that's not the 2 marks. That's good, though. We reviewed that, but that's not the 2 marks.
You were asking about the 2 marks of existence, or
The 2 marks of existence and non-existence. So the clue is right there. I mean, if you read the text, it's a mark of existence and non-existence, but it's often rendered different ways. Okay, one way it's rendered is eternalism and nihilism. And this is central to the Buddhist teaching. Eternalism has to do with an attitude that things are constant, unchanging, and there's a permanent soul or self that goes on and on and on. Nihilism denies any permanence whatsoever, any really cause and effect. It's completely a chaotic, random view. These 2 extremes, the Buddha was very clear to avoid, both in his time and as it continues now. But it's interesting. One of the things I want to do tonight a little bit is to encourage us to translate this out of categories and abstract concepts, like the 2 marks of existence. It just sounds like, for me, growing up, like a catechism term that I just, 2 marks of nihilism, eternal. What does that mean? What does that mean? How does it set up psychologically for me as a real experience, as opposed to a philosophical abstraction? This is Master Hua's commentary here, because he was doing this constantly, and by doing this, I sort of got a tone from his interpretation that these terms have to be not only translated into moving concepts, but they have to be modernized into the living experience that we have. So he says, existence here refers to those who are arrogant. Non-existence refers to those who have inferiority complexes. Very interesting what he does. And falling into the 2 means getting swept up in, like an ocean wave or tide. You're overwhelmed by these feelings, these moods. Either I'm really great, nothing surpasses me, I'm number 1, blah, 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 or I'm nothing, I'm nobody, I can't do anything, and so forth. And this becomes like a fog that surrounds you. Then when they say you fall into these 2 marks, you're actually literally like falling into a body of fog or water that you can't hardly get out of. Falling into emptiness is what's meant by non-existence, and falling into existence is what's meant by existence itself. But existence here, when you fall into it, the corresponding feeling is a hyper-anxiety. It's almost a neurotic hyper-anxiety where you're completely caught up in the changing patterns of things. The falling into emptiness corresponding is like a melancholy despondency and a despair and a gloom. These are the psychological or the psychodynamic correspondence to the ideas of this. And what the text is saying, if you have either of these formulations in your ideation, the corresponding psychological, emotional, physical will also align with that. And so the falling into existence, you start to get nervous, you start to get stressed out, you can't sleep. You're fretting constantly, do I have enough? And so on. You're worry. Falling into the other one is you just don't want to do anything. You just sort of despair, you pull back, you don't care about yourself even, or about others. And it becomes a kind of pool of drowning. They're also known as the 2 extremes. So all I'm encouraging here is that these key terms, like the middle way or the 2 extremes, in order for this to be something we can use, we have to interpret them into our lived experience. And this is very helpful because it's like a diagnostic manual. When I'm feeling all this despondency and melancholy, it must be aligning around a setting up or falling into getting caught in this state. And therefore, I have some leverage that I can change it. So whatever state you get caught up in, you can use the text to diagnose it and to counterbalance it and counteract it. It's very important. So that's why I see these texts as living diagnostic therapeutic manuals for a healthy, wholesome, true, full life. And we have to then unpack them that way, not as religious texts or even as only philosophical concepts, but actually as medicine. So then it goes, anyone who goes to all lands, everywhere in the 10 directions, broadly speaking, the wonderful Dharma, to cause its meaning to benefit and flourish, cause the meaning and the benefits to flourish, who dwells in reality's limits without being moved or shaken, is the person whose merit and virtue is equal to the Buddha. Again, you see the equalizing of the state of Buddha with anybody. This is really the democratization of the teachings that's going on here. It's really critical. Because often, especially a text like the Avatamsaka, people encounter it and think it's too far out. It's not for me. It has nothing to do. And here, it's actually bringing you right back to anyone who does this, anyone who can do this. It doesn't say it's going to happen immediately. I think that's where the unchanging zeal has to come on. But once you got a compass set and know that this is the direction, then only worry that you won't just keep step after step after step. And don't worry about getting there, because that actually is not stepping, that's stopping. So here too, I would say, again, looking at my teacher's commentary, the wonderful Dharma in that second line, speaking Miao-fa, wonderful Dharma. It means it's wondrous in the sense that it opens up your heart and your mind to seeing and feeling things in a quite different way than you did before. That's the wondrousness of it. It's not wondrous in that it's almost esoterically beyond the pale, but it's wondrous in that there's a joy and an excitement of feeling and seeing something differently than you did before. Yourself, your relationships, your job, whatever it is, you see it with a new light and a new angle, and that's the wonder. So it starts to open in that way. Master Wa's commentary here says, wondrous Dharma refers to Dharma which is appropriate. Appropriate is a word. If it isn't appropriate, then the wonderful isn't wonderful. If it's appropriate, then even what basically doesn't seem wonderful becomes wonderful. This is his commentary. In other words, it corresponds to where you are at that particular moment and where you might be. So it's right on the cusp of where you are, so you can resonate with it, and then it nudges you past that lock, past that knot, past that hang-up. And there the wonder occurs, in that liberation. Sometimes if I have a chiropractor work on me, or Japanese shiatsu, and I have something in my neck, right? And they do an adjustment. And you know what I'm talking about, adjustment? Yeah, they do an adjustment and something goes, oh, yeah, right? That's wonder. They got to a spot and then something opened. I haven't quite had that with Chinese massage, which is called Tuina. Somehow I haven't had the wondrousness of it yet because it's very painful. But sometimes this, also it can be something as simple as when you have a sneeze and all of a sudden there's tension and it breaks, or you can have a laughter and something opens up. That's the small aspects of the wonder. But this can get very, very large as well. And then the text I was quoting you earlier, which was the Tao Te Ching, has this wonderful passage where it describes if you are in step with this, and if your life is fulfilling and you're doing meaningful things, both internally for yourself and your relationships with others and the natural world, if you're in sync in this way, there's, as the text says, you are free of difficulties and you're always happy. But the Tao Te Ching says, and what happens there is that all these little wonders are constantly opening all the time. It's like springtime, and these little roots and things are coming up all around you. You see children in different ways. You see your family in different ways. You see hidden dimensions of goodness and curiosity and virtue and qualities in other people you didn't see before, because you're just open to letting that bloom. And the Tao Te Ching says, and then from wonder into wonder, existence opens. That's the line. And it means from this, it's just indefatigable. It's unending. It's just every day is a sort of a joyous, curious, happy experience. And age doesn't have anything to do with it. If you can get into this state of mind. Then it says, thus come turns the sublime Dharma wheel. Anyone who hears it and can enlighten to the Dharma nature is a person who will constantly see the Buddhas. It is 5 of 9, and I was hoping to do all 10. My apology. I know. Don't say anything, Ken. I didn't do it. So, I will. Come on, it's only 2 more verses left for sure. Next Friday. This is my, unflagging zeal. But I don't want to complete, because this last part is really important, and I want to talk about that. But that being said, I brought my journal from the highway, because I always like to share a story. So I will share this story tonight. So this one maybe has to do with the idea of the Chan Samadhi. And I go back to my teaching. What I thought Chan Samadhi was what I was doing in the meditation hall when I first came, which was crossing my legs. Eyes contemplate the nose contemplates the mouth contemplates the dantian, and one sits until the bell rings, you get up and walk, and you do that again. And the master said, that's not real samadhi, that's just working out in the gym. It's practice. The real samadhi is the 4: walking, standing, sitting, even in your sleep, being able to maintain that equanimity and clarity. So on the highway trip, I had to really work on this in different ways. I was going to say more than Heng Sure, but I would say in different ways. Because Heng Sure had a vow of silence and didn't interact and didn't have to interact with any people, that was left to me. And so he was working on his Chan Samadhi in different ways, but I had to work on both doing the bowing, and when I come up from a bow, deal with whoever was there. And sometimes there was nobody there, so I just deal with my own false thinking. But often there was somebody there. And then I had to see if my samadhi was strong enough. And in most cases it wasn't. So most of the early writing from these is about failures in maintaining that Chan Samadhi. This one has to do with, Chan Samadhi also means that you don't seek or anticipate or want something. That's that reception. The reception is you are there to pick up on, but not to project. So the wanting, the seeking leaves samadhi because it's going out, and it's looking and searching and fishing in a way. And so samadhi has to do with not going out, but it doesn't mean withdrawing then and completely turning down. That's not it either. So there's this real interesting balance you maintain of being available and there and alert without engaging, wanting, and also fearing and rejecting. So you have, in a sense, this is called wuxin, the without mind. It's the mind that is available, alert, and there, but not projecting and not rejecting. It's a very difficult, for me it was, very difficult thing to get at. So often on the pilgrimage, we met or encountered, and I'll just tell you honest, ghosts, spirits, good and wise advisors, baddies, bandits, cops, pimps, prostitutes. I mean, the whole thing of humanity, at one point or another, we crossed paths with. And so it was easy for me to maintain a kind of, I thought, equilibrium when people were kind and came out and made offerings and did a laugh bow. It wasn't so easy when they were hostile and negative. And so, but I realized that my pleasant happiness at getting offerings was a kind of leaving my samadhi, and my fear and rejection of the baddies was also leaving it. Neither of those were really centered. So one of the things ran into was people in authority, like police. And I took it on as a particular challenge to be able to work and subdue a police officer. I don't know my battery average, it was maybe 500 or something like that. But I felt, given my martial background, that I could relate and push hands with authorities like that. Okay, and sometimes they were not what you expected. So here, Heng Sure and I had made a mistake with rangers earlier. I won't tell you that story, but completely misread the scene and end up being foolishly embarrassed. Okay, and that's because we misinterpreted the text on a passage of giving to think we should just give whoever comes, give all our stuff away. And that we were being bodhisattvas in doing that, which was, on a cold, rainy night at 40 degrees with nothing anymore. We weren't enlightened, we were getting sick. But, so, and then sometimes rangers would come out and they're really sincere, and I would be a little stiff and standoffish and not open, defensive. So in this case, a ranger had come up a week or so before, and his name was Curtis. And Curtis, it turns out, was a very sincere ranger. He was interested in Buddhism. And he lived alone in a little mountain cabin without even electricity up, and this is in the Big Sur area. He was a ranger, though, but he was reading these Buddhist texts and doing his meditation. He was very straight and very sincere. So I could have been more open to him and less suspicious, having, the previous burn. So now, instead of being just receptive and open, I was thinking, if I meet some rangers again, I am just going to open my heart to them and be, You can see already, this is, all right. So then, these two rangers come up, and I think, oh, they must be friends of Curtis. Because they have the same uniform, the same emblem, the same green car, and the hats and the badges. Now, I'll tell you, I ignored a feeling of caution because I was seeking to be giving and to be open. There was a feeling of caution, and this is how samadhi practice works. It's faster than your thought. It's faster than your mind. It's actually from here, and it's a direct, intuitive, Now, you can second and third guess it, but when you attune that mechanism to see things from the belly and not the head and the eye and the mind, it becomes more and more reliable. So it was not completely polished, but it was starting to work, and I had this feeling of caution. But I went out to them. I just opened myself up to them. And all of a sudden, they were just asking all these questions and peppering me. And what was happening was they were just kind of sucking off my energy. And I felt trapped, like a spider in a web. This is my writing I have here. And I was losing my chi, losing my energy. Now, in these cases, when I said sometimes we meet ghosts and spirits, often the ghosts and spirits would manifest in forms like this. I'm not going to go into great detail and explain it to you. I'm just telling you that's what it was. Okay? So, I realized that whoever they were, I was losing my energy to them, and they might not be who they seem. What to do? Another car squeals to a stop. A ranger gets out. Same uniform, badge, same color, but a different demeanor. He's very clear and strong. I'm reading you. Martial and ready alert. He strides over the highway to us, steps between me and the two other rangers, hands on his hip, pistol like this on his pistol, and I have to read the line here. Bold. And I say, the two say howdy to him. Can we help you? And he says, yeah, sternly. I got a couple questions. Who are you two? Okay. Oh yeah, Lauren's face. And all of a sudden, well, I'm Bob, and that there, my partner is Louie. He said, and they said to him, are you new around here? To the straight ranger. He says, no, 5 years, this is my turf. Oh. Well, this is our territory too, they say. He said, no, this is my territory, and I've never seen either of you before. No, he's bracing for a showdown. I am in charge of this area, and I don't recognize either of you. And it's very tense and very heavy, and a talk begins, and I creep away, go back up to Heng Sure, and start bowing again. I never knew what happened as a result of that. But clearly, the real ranger was more than just a real ranger, because he actually saved me from a very difficult spiritual, maybe even physical situation. Who the other two were, I don't know, but they obviously weren't legitimate rangers. So there's many things like that that happened on the pilgrimage that seemed to be both ordinary and not ordinary, where the ordinary realm and the not so ordinary realm interfuse. The key for me was not to get attached, and this was my teacher's teaching, to trying to figure out which is which, because you have to have considerable wisdom and spiritual penetrations to figure that out. What you need to do is pay attention to this. Even if it is a bodhisattva, if you start going out and losing your balance and center, then it's an obstacle. And even if it's an obstacle, if you stay centered and clear and don't go out and move, it's no problem whatsoever. So only by attending to this do you negotiate. And this not only has to do with, at that level, but it has to do in your ordinary relationships. Reading who you draw near to, who you move away from, what things you do or what things you don't do. You have an internal compass that's very true and reliable if it's attuned through precepts and equanimity and training, that you can more and more rely on without having to second and third guess it. But in leaving that and thinking there's something outside to get, or there's something that's going to get me, and you start to externalize all this, you lose the compass, you lose the tools you need to perceive it, and that's where the trouble starts. So that's why my teacher said at the end of this, at the place of seeking nothing, there are no more worries. As soon as you seek for something, you will be obstructed. And so the samadhi practice for me wasn't to anticipate and be ready for something, or anticipate and be the opposite, closed off, but was to take it as it came and not lose center, not lose the intuitive center that sees things as they really are. And then that's what's called appropriate. That's what you appropriately respond to things as they really are. And that was the appropriate wonderfulness of the Dharma that this passage talked about. So anyhow, shared with you. Any questions? I mean, you might have questions. I don't know if I can answer them on that. I hope I didn't shock or surprise you too much with.
Was the Soul Ranger Curtis?
No.
Okay.
He wasn't Curtis. Curtis was another one that had the same vibe. Curtis was very sincere, very genuine. And the other ranger that came up in this situation was, upright. Excuse me, what are we doing here? Like Sister Mary Prisco when I was in 8th grade, boom. The other two, though, were really, friendly, really easy, and all of a sudden, but it was once I had the feeling, I knew I was outflowing. I could feel it. It's just like as sure as you cut in the blood, and then all of a sudden this guy comes up. Often, after this, when I explained this to Sherfo will go, those were actually ghosts. And the real ranger was a bodhisattva. And I said, we should have bowed. He said, don't be stupid. So now you think another ranger's going to come, you're going to bow, and you're going to miss it again. You just shake his head. You guys are really hard. What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to ask what the master said.
Mm-hmm. The reason I know these encounters, after a while, you get pretty attuned to seeing a ghost and a spirit and recognizing that. But often not. And then when the master come out visit, he'd say, well, what's happening? What's going on? Well, this and this happened. And he kind of, that was this and that was that. And you go, oh, gosh, yeah. That's. But I wouldn't directly be able to categorize it. There's a lot that goes on. I mean, you just see you're bowing on the highway, but in the highway there are worlds within worlds within worlds. In this room, there are worlds within worlds in this world. In our everyday reality, they're there. And we're only seen through a glass darkly, sort of aware of these. But as you attune yourself, these become more obvious, matter of fact even. But I'm going back to the Chan Samadhi thing. The key to entering and dealing and working with all this is to never lose your center. Not step out, not seek anything, not be afraid of anything. And Master Hua would say, when you get to this point, the very extraordinary seems very ordinary. And if you see the extraordinary is very ordinary, you're okay. And he says sometimes the very ordinary, paradoxically, is most extraordinary. But he was getting you back to, if you're centered and just be a real, genuine person without fishing and seeking and all of this kind of thing, you'll be fine. And you will enter this realm and see things as they really are, and it'll be no difficulty. As the Buddha says, it's clear as seeing an apple in the palm of your hand. But between getting to that state and getting rid of the wanting, the seeking, the fearing, and that's why the cultivation isn't about seeking this kind of stuff, but clearing the ground for it to manifest naturally within yourself. And it doesn't come then from the outside. So I went over a little, but I thought I'd share one of these. This whole thing is filled with one after another like this. But anyhow, no more questions?
Did everything in your spiral notebook make it in the book?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I thought we were done, but then a couple months ago, I was upstairs in my office, and Heng Sure said, we just have this last segment to finish, really from going up the coast from the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge to the Ukiah. That would be the last volume. And I said, yeah, but what you just gave me, there's this whole gap. He said, oh, yeah. Wonder. Then I reached under my desk, and there's a whole box of journals from previously that we had neglected. Yeah, so there's more of this in there. And as we got closer to the city, more of this started to happen. It says, when the wave grows an inch, the demons grow a foot, and so forth. So, and as we got closer, the master was able to come out more often and shed some light on our our states and what was going on. So yeah, and I don't know the answer to that, but I think no, it hasn't all been shared yet, especially that last leg hasn't been shared. Yeah. So more to come. Okay. I was told by instructions, quickly finish the journal when I got to the city. Do you know that was in 1979 or 80? And then the same instruction, and quickly learn Chinese. Well, I am behind the curve here quite a bit. Anyhow, Okay, so we'll close tonight on that note and then do our transference. The Jinchuan and Jinshu, Jinhui and Jinchuan are up at Redwood Vihara this weekend. Our MA2 class has their little retreat up there. They're going and sitting among the tall trees. Ken, are there any announcements? There's a Guanyin session starting a week from this Sunday at the City of 10,000. Is there still room for people to enroll or not?
I'm closing the registration on Monday morning.
How's that?
Monday morning, I'm closing the registration.
Registration closes this Monday morning, so if you're...
I'll give the head count soon. Yes.
Okay, so registration for the Guanyin coming up starting next Sunday closes this Monday morning.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't want to register through us, you can just go and hang out, that's fine too. You can do that too.
Say that again. If you don't want to register, you can just go and hang out with Guanyin.
Yeah, just go hang out with Guanyin.
Okay. That's very Berkeley. Right, okay. Let's do the train.